Captain Emma Rodriguez was told her F-22 Raptor training at Tyndall Air Force Base was just another routine stealth system check at 42,847 feet. But when her aircraft's radar signature suddenly appeared on every enemy tracking system from Cuba to Venezuela, she had 127 seconds to execute a maneuver that existed only in classified test data. Where are you watching this story from? Tell us in the comments. And if you have similar aviation stories or know someone who does, we want to hear them. Let's chat below. The morning sun blazed across the Florida Panhandle as Captain Emma Rodriguez completed her pre-flight inspection of the F-22 Raptor at Tyndall Air Force Base. At 31, she had been flying fifth-generation fighters for 4 years, but her assignment to the 325th Fighter Wing's Advanced Stealth Testing Program was still met with skepticism from her male colleagues. "Another diversity check ride," muttered Major Jake Stevens as he watched Emma methodically inspect her aircraft's stealth coating. "Wonder how many training wheels they put on our mission today." Captain Mike Lawson, adjusting his helmet bag, shook his head. "She's been here 8 months and still hasn't flown a real intercept mission. Today's probably just another GPS navigation exercise they're calling advanced stealth testing." What they didn't know was that Emma's training mission involved testing radar cross-section reduction techniques in contested airspace off the Florida coast, where Cuban and Venezuelan radar installations regularly attempted to track U.S. military aircraft. Staff Sergeant Carlos Martinez, Emma's dedicated crew chief, looked up from his final systems check. He'd been maintaining F-22s since 2019 and had worked with dozens of pilots. "You boys might want to check the flight manifest before making jokes," he said quietly. "Why?" Stevens laughed. "What's she gonna do, practice gentle turns at Angels 30? Martinez tapped his classified mission folder. "Today's exercise puts her aircraft against the most advanced surface-to-air tracking systems in the Caribbean. If she screws up, half the hemisphere's gonna know exactly where our Raptor is." Emma strapped into her cockpit, running through the complex startup sequence that made the F-22 the most advanced air superiority fighter ever built. Her mission was straightforward in concept, but demanding in execution. Fly a predetermined route through international airspace while maintaining complete radar invisibility against multiple hostile tracking attempts. The morning briefing had been clinical. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Parker, the wing's operations officer, had outlined the mission parameters with military precision. "Rodriguez, you'll be flying solo at flight level 428. Your route takes you through a corridor that's actively monitored by at least 6 different radar installations. Your job is to remain completely invisible while collecting electronic intelligence on their tracking capabilities." The implied message was clear. This wasn't training. This was an operational test of both the aircraft's stealth capabilities and the pilot's ability to exploit them under real-world conditions. Now, climbing through 35,000 feet over the Gulf of Mexico, Emma was about to discover that some tests become very real very quickly. At 42,847 feet, Emma's F-22 was invisible to conventional radar. The aircraft's angular design and radar-absorbing materials created a radar cross-section smaller than a small bird. She was flying a carefully planned route that kept her in international airspace while passing close enough to hostile radar installations to test their detection capabilities. "Viper 77, this is Overwatch. You're showing clean on all tracking systems. Continue mission profile," came the voice of the airborne warning and control aircraft monitoring her progress. Emma acknowledged the transmission while monitoring her own electronic warfare systems. The F-22's Advanced Integrated Defensive Electronic Countermeasure System was passively collecting data on every radar signal attempting to find her aircraft. For the first 47 minutes of the mission, everything went according to plan. Then, at exactly 0947 hours, something went catastrophically wrong. "Viper 77, Overwatch, we're showing multiple radar acquisitions on your position. You're lighting up every screen from Havana to Caracas." Emma's blood went cold. Her stealth systems indicated normal operation, but according to the AWACS aircraft, her F-22 was suddenly visible to every hostile radar in the region. "Overwatch, Viper 77, my stealth systems show green across the board, running diagnostics now." But even as she spoke, Emma could see the problem on her threat warning display. Multiple surface-to-air missile systems were attempting to achieve targeting lock on her aircraft. The distinctive warbling tone that indicated radar-guided missile activation filled her headset. Viper 77, you have multiple SAM sites attempting lock-on. Cuban SA-20s at your 2 o'clock, Venezuelan S-300s at your 11 o'clock. Recommend immediate evasive action. Emma's training kicked in immediately. She rolled the F-22 into a steep diving turn while activating the aircraft's electronic countermeasures. But whatever had compromised her stealth signature wasn't being affected by standard defensive procedures. Overwatch Viper 77. ECM is active, but I'm still showing on hostile tracking systems. Request vectors for immediate egress. The AWACS controller's response carried genuine concern. Viper 77, all egress routes are now covered by active SAM systems. They're tracking your movement in real time. Emma realized she was facing a scenario that existed only in theoretical studies. A stealth aircraft that had somehow lost its invisibility while deep in hostile radar coverage. Every direction led through the engagement envelope of surface-to-air missiles specifically designed to destroy aircraft like her. That's when she remembered something from her classified briefing materials. During development testing, Lockheed Martin engineers had discovered that the F-22's stealth characteristics could be temporarily enhanced by flying in a specific attitude that reduced radar reflection from certain angle. The technique, designated Enhanced Low Observable Configuration, had never been tested in operational conditions because it required precise control inputs that pushed the aircraft to its performance limit. Overwatch Viper 77, I'm going to attempt ELOC protocol. Stand by. There was a pause before the controller responded. Viper 77, ELOC procedures are not authorized for operational flights. That's test pilot stuff. Copy, Overwatch, but right now it's the only option that doesn't involve getting shot down. Emma began the complex sequence of control inputs that would configure her F-22 for enhanced stealth. She rolled the aircraft to a precise 23-degree bank angle while simultaneously adjusting her pitch attitude to exactly 4.7 degrees nose up. The combination created an aerodynamic configuration that reduced the aircraft's radar cross-section to almost nothing, but it also made the plane extremely difficult to control. Flying an ELOC required constant tiny corrections to maintain the exact attitude needed for maximum stealth effectiveness. Too much bank angle and the aircraft would become visible again. Too little, and the same thing would happen. The margin for error was measured in single degrees. Viper 77, we're showing intermittent returns on your position. Whatever you're doing is working, but the SAM sites are still trying to maintain lock. Emma held the demanding flight attitude for 67 seconds, her hands making constant micro-adjustments to keep the F-22 in the precise configuration needed for invisibility. It was like flying formation with an invisible aircraft while being shot at. Then, suddenly, her threat warning display went quiet. Overwatch Viper 77, all tracking has ceased. I show clear skies. Confirmed, Viper 77. You've disappeared from all hostile radar systems. Nice flying. RTB when ready. Emma gradually transitioned back to normal flight configuration and pointed her F-22 toward home. As she climbed back to cruising altitude, she ran through her post-mission checklist while trying to understand what had caused her stealth systems to fail in the first place. The answer came during the post-flight briefing. Lieutenant Colonel Parker met Emma at the aircraft as she shut down engines. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her posture that suggested this hadn't been a routine training mission after all. Rodriguez, we need to talk. Bring your mission data recorder. In the classified briefing room, Parker pulled out a folder marked with security classifications that Emma hadn't expected to see on a training mission. Captain, what happened out there today wasn't a systems failure. It was a test. Emma looked up from her flight notes. Ma'am, your F-22 was equipped with experimental radar reflectors designed to simulate stealth system failure. We needed to know if operational pilots could successfully employ ELOC procedures under combat conditions. The pieces clicked into place. The SAM tracking was real, but my stealth failure was artificial. Exactly. Cuban and Venezuelan radar operators thought they'd achieved their first F-22 detection. They have no idea they were participating in a U.S. Air Force test program. Parker opened the classified folder. What you accomplished today validates 3 years of theoretical development work. ELOC procedures are now cleared for operational use, and you're qualified as an instructor for the program. Major Stevens approached Emma later that evening in the squadron ready room. His earlier dismissiveness had been replaced by genuine professional curiosity. Rodriguez, I heard you pulled off something pretty impressive today. Care to share any lessons learned? Emma looked at the man who had questioned her capabilities just that morning. The most important thing I learned, Major, is that sometimes the manual procedures aren't enough. When everything goes wrong, You have to be prepared to use techniques that barely exist. And the ELOC stuff? Classified. But if you're interested in advanced stealth employment, I'm now qualified to teach it. Over the following weeks, Emma found herself in the unexpected position of training other F-22 pilots in techniques that had been theoretical until her mission proved their operational value. The pilots who had dismissed her as a diversity hire were now learning from someone whose flying had contributed to the advancement of stealth technology. Captain Lawson, who had made jokes about training wheels, approached Emma during a squadron briefing. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. What you did out there, I've been flying fighters for 12 years, and I've never heard of anything like ELOC procedures. That's because they didn't exist in operational form until last week," Emma replied. "The F-22 is capable of things we're still discovering. Today's impossible maneuver might be tomorrow's standard procedure." 3 months later, when tensions with Venezuela required increased reconnaissance missions in the Caribbean, Emma led a flight of 4 F-22s through heavily defended airspace using ELOC techniques that kept them invisible to the most advanced surface-to-air missile systems in the hemisphere. The mission's success led to Emma's selection for the Air Force's Elite Test Pilot School, where she would continue developing advanced employment techniques for fifth-generation fighters. But perhaps the most significant change was in how her squadron approached the capabilities of their aircraft. They learned that the F-22's most advanced features weren't just in its computers or engines, but in the hands of pilots who understood that innovation doesn't end with aircraft delivery. Lieutenant Colonel Parker, writing Emma's performance evaluation, noted, "Captain Rodriguez demonstrated that operational innovation requires not just technical knowledge, but the courage to employ untested procedures when conventional methods fail. Her contribution to advanced stealth employment techniques will influence F-22 operations for years to come." During a squadron social event 6 months after her test mission, Major Stevens raised his beer in a toast to Captain Rodriguez, who taught us that the F-22's most important stealth feature is a pilot who knows how to think beyond the manual. The response was immediate and unanimous. "Here, here." Emma smiled and raised her own glass. To operational innovation and the understanding that today's test procedures are tomorrow's standard tactics. As the evening continued, younger pilots gathered around Emma, eager to learn about advanced stealth employment and the mindset required for test flying. The woman who had once been seen as just another pilot filling a quota had become the squadron's expert on pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But late that night, reviewing mission reports, Emma reflected on the broader implications of her experience. The F-22 was more than just an aircraft. It was a platform for innovation that required pilots willing to explore its full potential under conditions that couldn't be replicated in any training environment. The classified mission would remain classified. The specific techniques she had employed would be shared only with pilots who had appropriate security clearances. But the principle she had demonstrated, that operational excellence requires constant innovation, would influence how the squadron approached every mission. Sometimes the most important advances in military aviation come not from engineering breakthroughs, but from operational pilots who refuse to accept that current procedures represent the limits of what's possible. Captain Emma Rodriguez had proven that point at 42,847 feet over the Gulf of Mexico, flying a maneuver that didn't exist in any manual until she made it work when everything else had failed. The woman they hadn't expected to contribute to F-22 development had become the pilot who pushed the aircraft's capabilities into new territory, proving that innovation and operational excellence have no gender requirement, only the demand for skill, courage, and the willingness to attempt what others consider impossible. The woman they hadn't expected to contribute to F-22 development had become the pilot who pushed the aircraft's capabilities into new territory, proving that innovation and operational excellence have no gender requirements, only the demand for skill, courage, and the willingness to attempt what others consider impossible.